Hey everybody, welcome to our next chapters in our Genesis series. We're going to do chapters 10 and 11 today because 10 doesn't have a lot of information. Basically, it's a whole bunch of genealogies, but then in chapter 11 we have the Tower of Babel. So let's get to it, shall we? So, excuse me, gotta move myself out of the way, it's the whole Zoom thing where it puts your face. So anyway, so Genesis chapter 10, we're just going to look at a real quick summary. So Genesis 10 describes the generations of Noah and the areas in which his descendants would establish themselves. So this comes into play in later chapters that we're going to look at. So that's kind of why chapter 10 is important. So a couple of key verses just want to look at. So Genesis 10:6, the sons of Ham. So of course we know Noah had three sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. And of course Ham is cursed. And why do we know that Ham's cursed? Because Ham can go bad. Yeah, I thought it was funny. Anyway, so the sons of Ham. And Ham was cursed because he doesn't cover Noah up after Noah passes out from drinking. He kind of goes out and gossips about him, and so Noah curses him and says that he will be a servant to his brothers. So just going over, so Ham's offspring are Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. So we know that Cush and Egypt, of course, are to the south and south of the land of Canaan. Of course, then Canaan is where Abraham will set up. Put is not a whole. We don't know about a whole bunch about Put. Uh, verse 8. So Cush, one of Ham's sons, Ham's grandson would be Nimrod. Excuse me, and Nimrod was the first on the earth to be a mighty man. In this context, mighty man means that he was a great leader, a tyrant. I think that would be an accurate description of him. Verse 9, we see that he was a mighty hunter, a warrior, so he's a conqueror before the Lord. This is not saying that the Lord is supporting Nimrod or what he's doing. He's just stating that he's doing it with God's knowledge. Not God knows what's going on. So therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And so, and there is an assumption because a person does great things. Obviously, that means that God is supporting them, God is blessing them. That is not necessarily what this text means. It's just stating the obvious that God allowed this to happen. So in verse 10, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. We're going to see that in chapter 11. And then we have some other places. And then the next one in verse 11, and then from that land, he went into Assyria and built Nineveh. So Assyria comes into play much later into First and Second Kings, or more Second Kings. And then we also see Assyria and Nineveh come into play with Jonah. So that's very important. We will see these folks later on. And then, of course, in verse 12, lays out the other great cities other than Nineveh. So some good background information. These places are going to come up later. So that's kind of why it's critical that we understand this. Then verse 15, we see that Canaan fathered Sidon. We see Sidon also later on. We see Sidon in the New Testament. It's one of the places Jesus goes, but we also see the Sidon is a place that, sorry, my sinuses are terrible today, will be destroyed later on. And then Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn Heth, and then the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon into the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza. Do we recognize that name, yeah, it's in the news today. Gaza is nothing new. Gaza has been a place of conflict since the beginning of time. I mean, it's been a hotbed, and the Canaanites, these are the same people that Israel is fighting with today. This has not changed. I mean, this is a 5,000-year-old fight. It's been going on forever, so it's nothing new. And then, of course, we also see in the direction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which those are going to come up later on in Genesis. We're going to see that those pop up. So a lot of names that we're going to see that are introduced to us here in chapter 10. All right, so let's now move on to chapter 11, since we've now basically chapter 10 gave us some good background information, gave us some characters. So now we can get on into chapter 11. Of course, this is the tale of the Tower of Babel. So now the whole earth had one language and the same words. So, of course, everyone's from the line of Noah. Everyone comes from Noah's background. And if so, of course, they're all going to have the same language. They had pretty much the same granddad or dad or great granddad. It's the same language that came with the family. Verse 2, and as the people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. So, of course, people were nomads. They followed the herds. They had sheep and goats, things like that. They would move them around to where the grass was green. So this now is our first indication of some settling down. And we're going to see them that they're going to start to build a city. So verse 3, and they said to one another, come, let us build bricks and burn them thoroughly, that they had bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar. So this is the beginning of building. So Moses is inspired by God to explain, the start of building and building of cities, the move from a nomadic type of living, and not that everyone would give up the nomadic living. Some tribes, and Abraham was from a nomadic tribe, but people there are starting to settle into cities. Verse 4, and then they came and said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be despised over the face of the whole earth. So, okay, what's the issue? What's the issue here with what's happening? Well, let's kind of break this down real quick. So come, let us build ourselves a city. So now the building of the city of itself is not a bad thing. That's not necessarily bad, but why? Why are they building the city? And of course, we're going to look as you continue to read the text, you find out why for the building. But this is just to let you know that it's not the thing itself that is the problem. It is the intention of our hearts that becomes the problem. See, and Jesus said that. It's from the heart that the problem comes. So it's their intentions. What do they plan to do with it? The thing is not the problem. It is what you do with the thing makes it the problem. So, everybody talks about, your iPhone, your cell phone. They're so terrible. No, it's nothing wrong with this. It's what we do with it that's the problem. So it's us, not the thing. I think we're going to see that here. And so we see in the next part a tower with its top to heaven. So this is their philosophy, is that we're going to build something so monumental that we could reach God. That we could be like God. We're going to build such a great tower that people will not only see that, we can do things like God. We can create, and we're going to create something so big that we can reach him. That's where the problem comes in. Us believing that we can be like God, that we can do things like God, and that we can reach him in such a manner. Next part, all right? So let us make a name for ourselves. So it really wasn't about settling down, you know, building a city that where we can stay and not keep moving around. But this is more about making ourselves famous. Look, we want to make ourselves famous. We want people to look at us and say, "Wow, woo! Look at them." And the second part basically says the same thing. Well, at least we be despised. So they basically went like, just a bunch of nomads, just a bunch of people just wandering around. No, we're going to build us a great big city, and people are going to look at us and think they're great, they're powerful, they're strong. And so people won't despise us. They will what? They'll fear us. They'll fear us. So they wanted others to fear them. The general thought is that if we show weakness to people, they will attack you. And that's the thought here. And when others see the tower, they will know that these people are not to be messed with. Uh, and the point is here is not trusting God. Man putting his protection and his trust in himself rather than putting his trust in the Lord. We have the same problem today. And we're actually going to see this again. It's going to be a recurring theme where man doesn't trust God, when they come out of the Exodus and they're standing, ready to cross over, and the 12 spies and two of them come back and go, yeah, the place is great, and yes, we can win. And the 10 come back and go, yeah, the place is great, but no, we can't win. That's the same thing. Can't trust, not trusting God, doing it upon themselves. So let's get into verse 5. So and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children had built. Okay. Was it necessary for God to come see the building? No, no. He knew what was going on. But it is an example that God could enter into space and time whenever he wanted. That's just, and we have, so Muslims believe that one of the things that they, excuse me, my ear itch. One of the things that they complain about is that God, Allah, would never bother himself into coming to the earth. He would never lower himself to do that. But then you would ask them, okay, well, what about, the Tower of Babel? And it clearly says that God came down. Also, the burning bush, several other instances where God showed himself. So they have a bit of a problem there, but God, anytime he feels like it, can enter into space and time and so come to the earth when he such feels like. Of course, he did that in Jesus when he was incarnate. Verse 6, and the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. So behold, right? Behold, they are one people, united in cause and focus. United in cause and focus. So humans can be united in cause and focus when we want to be. And that's not always a negative thing, but in most cases, it usually turns out to be negative. There are times when humans come into a focus to take on evil, but in a lot of times that focus of being united is to cause evil. And that's a sad, sad statement. And that's basically what God is saying here, that no amount of evil will be beyond them. So that they have one language. So communication and information was able to flow freely. There was no distraction. Sorry, my ear. It just there's no way to. There's no miscommunication. A lot of times, even with us who speak the speak the same language, there's miscommunication. If it's the English people and Americans are separated by a common language, but we have different ways of saying things, and that's true even in different parts of our nation. People in the South talk differently from people in the North and people in the West. So, but here, communication's free flowing, information's no problems. Then to continue on, this is only the beginnings of what they will be able to do. God gives a statement on the history of mankind that they will continue to do that which brings themselves glory. So men are looking to glorify themselves and not glorify God. Nothing they propose will do. Can't tell or read today. Nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them. So together, man can accomplish many things, but mostly evil. Mostly evil. Unfortunately, that is the nature of man. And so God is just sitting here stating the obvious for us, that when most of the time when we get together, it's not normally for a good thing. Our secular world will tell you today, oh no, if we could all just get together and we could all cooperate together, then we can do such wonderful things. Well, let me remind you that when a whole big group of people decided to cooperate together, called the Nazi Party, they slaughtered 6 million Jews, caused 15 million people to die, caused a massive world war. After that, the Russians, who all got together and decided together that there was a group of their folks that they didn't like, and they slaughtered 20 million of those. And then we have in China that the Communist Party in China, when it decided to do the Cultural Revolution, there was a group of people who didn't agree with that, so that they were deemed in the way, and they slaughtered 60 million of those. So these were people that all had the same focus together, and they caused great chaos and madness. So on most of the times when we're focused on the same thing, it's usually we're focused on evil. There are times when we have been focused on good and we're able to do great things. The conquering of Nazi Germany being one of those, and the defeat of Japan during World War II, but those are far and few in between. And that's what God's basically saying here. So verse 7, so come, let us go down. Again, let us. Who's us? Who's us? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Let's go down and there and confuse their language so that they may not understand each other. And so the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. So when they could no longer communicate with each other, there was confusion, there's chaos. And so they found the people that they could communicate with, and then those groups left. So this is God spreading people out throughout the world. And so therefore its name was called Babel, right? We hear that, people who babble on, who just talk a lot. But we really don't say anything. So babbling means you talk a lot, but you're not really saying anything. Sort of like Joe Biden. Oh yeah. Because the Lord confused their language all over the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them from all over the face of the earth. So note now the two purposes. One, that man would have to cooperate in smaller groups, right? Less evil, smaller groups. That humans would spread across the entire earth, right? This is moving everyone out. And that Babel would later become Babylon. This is the first of the establishment of what would later become the great city and the empire of Babylon. So moving on, we have another section of genealogy here in verses 10 through 29, which is basically the genealogy from Shem to Abram. That just catches us up to where Abram is at the point in time. So we see a clear line of succession from Noah to Abram. We know exactly where his line ends up, and it's from Shem, who is not the cursed son. So starting in verse 30, so now Sarai was barren and she had no children. This is Abram's wife, Sarai. And verse 31, so Tehran took Abram, so Tehran is Abram's dad, Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, which was the grandson, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, and his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. So there was an intention by Abram's dad to go to Canaan, but he was not directed by God to go there. He just took it upon himself that this is where he was going to go, but he doesn't make it. He gets to Haran and they stop. They don't go any further. And so the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So the journey to Canaan was actually begun by Abram's father, but ended with his death. There's no indication that Tehran was told by God to travel to Canaan. That would be the job of Abram. And we will see that in chapter 12, where we will pick up with Abram, who later becomes Abraham, being chosen by God to be a great nation and a blessing to the world. So that is it for chapters 10 and 11 in Genesis. I hope you're enjoying this. I will try to get 12 up sooner rather than later. I have it done. I just have to record it. So we will see you later. Everyone, God bless and have a great day.